Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whenever it is you're watching this episode or listening to us today. Before we begin, welcome to LifeVision Lab Podcast. I am your host, Shwetha, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge the energy of the world today. There's a lot happening, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of emotions moving through people, families, and communities across the globe. Even when events aren't touching us directly, our nervous system feels it. The background hum of stress, the sense that things feel heavier than usual. And in moments like this, conversations about the mind aren't abstract, they're essential. Because when the world feels overwhelming, the way we understand ourselves becomes the anchor. Today's episode is an invitation to slow down, look beneath the surface, not to escape what's happening, but to meet it with more awareness, more clarity, and compassion. Yes, today is someone whose work sits at the intersection of deep psychological insight and real world application. Blair Dunkley is one of the world's leading psychological profilers. In minutes, he's able to see patterns in the mind that often take years for people to recognize in themselves. This isn't intuition, it's not a party trick, it's a skill, and more importantly, the teachable one. Blair works with people to help them understand how their mind is wired, how that wiring influences everything from emotional health to decision making, leadership, and wealth creation. His work has helped people navigate chronic anxiety, depression, phobias, and long standing internal conflict. And beyond healing, he also coaches professionals, executives, and business owners to unlock the power of their greatest asset, which is our mind. This conversation isn't about fixing yourself, it's about understanding yourself. Blair, thank you for joining me today. I want to start from the beginning. You do work that many people find fascinating, but also deeply confronting. How did you first come into psychological profiling, and what problem were you actually trying to solve when this work began? But before all of that, welcome and thank you for joining me
Oh,
today.
thank you so much for having me. I super appreciate it. It's great to be able to share this with your audience. So thank you.
Coming back to the question, how did you first come into psychological profiling, and what problem were you actually trying to solve when this work began?
Well, that's a great question. One of the things that I was working on at the time was I was at life skills colleges. We had implemented research done by the government, and the research was a 5-year research project where they spent tens of millions of dollars on doing psychological research to try and sort out elements that were there. They defined some coping, problem solving, and ultimately success skills, but the research was ended, the funding was cut, and as most government funding, it starts out really well, great intention, and then the funding is cut on it when it starts showing great promise. And so we took up, myself, my mother at the time, she's now since passed, but we started a college called Life Skills College, and we kept that going for 37 years. We were taking literally government research and applying it to our student population. Our student population was referred to us by different government agencies. Almost 100% of them were referrals, and 80% of those students were potentially suicidal. So we did not have the luxury of doing things that felt good. We needed to
Mm,
get things that kept people alive, got
mhm,
people out of their stuck states and into resourcefulness. But I also needed
mhm.
to keep my coaches and instructors effective so that they didn't burn out. So I had learned quite a number of counseling skills. I noticed some very interesting things that came about from the research that was done, one of which was there seemed to be some patterns that you could hear problems. And I was trained up in a number of counseling methodologies and coaching, but there was gaps there. And during all of that time, my father went in for open heart surgery, and he was just about going to be released from the recovery ward, the intensive care unit. And 15 minutes before he was released, for some reason, he stopped breathing. The doctors rushed over, intubated him. He was focused on getting intubation, but they gave him a drug to paralyze him and to basically put him in a coma, which he never came out of. So my father was in a coma for 14 years. I had a relatively new company that had 80% of my student population being potentially suicidal. My mother was my partner, married to my father. Couldn't run to her. I was trained up as both a life skills coach working on becoming a coach trainer at that time. Plus, I was also trained in the area of mindset because I thought that was the hottest thing going at the time. But my mindset broke. And I had students telling me that my mindset broke. And so I needed something that actually works. Not life skills continued to work, but mindset broke. I needed a replacement. I needed something that was identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable, and not based on how I felt or believed. And in the world today, everybody, like what you're feeling, what you're believing, people are being told to believe this and feel that. What if we don't over emotionalize things? What if we just take a look at behaviors that are effective? If you look inward and you just, for lack of a better word, navel gaze,
Mm,
and you don't have methodologies to change the behavior, and all you're
mhm,
doing is dealing with the emotional fallout.
mhm,
Um, I've worked a lot with people with mental health issues. That is not, I would argue, that is not a healthy way for people to deal with the immense amount of stress and their inability to cope with what's going on with life. We need specific things that we can do right now so we can manage ourselves, so we actually change our behaviors, which
mhm,
change our feelings, which change our beliefs. If we just try to feel better,
mhm,
we sort of con ourselves into
mm,
temporarily feeling better, but does it actually change our life? Well, no, it doesn't. So that's part of the whole issue with profiling is I listen to people and I hear
mhm,
how people are putting on masks of being stuck in their state. They smile when they're not feeling happy because they don't want to be bringing everybody else down around them. Well, what would happen if we could change our behavior and instead of smiling as a mask, we actually smile and it's our truth. It's not just our truth, but that behavior is congruent with the direction we're going in because we see a way through. Not exactly a way out, but a way through to
way
know that we
true.
can get to the other side.
That's beautifully put. And so, when did you realize this wasn't just an insight for you, but something that could genuinely change how people heal, grow, and perform?
Well, it came down when I broke, like literally broke down. The doctor called us in 2 weeks after my dad went into a coma, and I wound up just that night going home and literally falling apart. It became like burst into tears, convulsively crying. You can say I was having literally an emotional breakdown at that moment. I couldn't really talk to my mother because she was going through similar stuff. I could talk to my mindset trainer and talk to her. and she walked me through the same 90 minutes of exercises that I put myself through, and nothing happened. And I told her that, and then she pointed the finger at me and said, Blair, you don't believe enough. And I was livid. I would have killed to get out of spot. I would have done anything to not be so horrible, to feel terrible, to feel incapacitated. And that's where I knew mindset was a lie. So, and now there's science behind that. It's not my opinion. It's proven. Mindset works at best 1% of the time. And if you want, I can give people the link to a research study published in the Association of Psychological Science. And that shows that mindset has 1% chance of working, increasing you to help you become more successful, but it also has a 12% probability of you actually being held back. So a negative 12% impact on you. So if you're not moving ahead, you're sliding back and you're trying to fix your mindset, please stop. It's better for you to just stop doing that and you'll be even, but preferably start taking a look at how to think differently, not what to think.
Mm.
And that's huge. It's simple, but it's huge. So when I did my research, we rejected the core assumptions of self-help. Okay. Self-help assumes that if you feel better, you'll do better. Well, what if you don't feel better quickly enough? Are you still going to do badly? And are you stuck? Or, what's going to happen? Well, that's not necessarily a very effective way to be right now when the world does not feel great. Generally,
Mm.
people feel better all the time and they talk themselves into it, but their behaviors and they're stuck in the same pattern. And so they stay stuck. So they temporarily get this relief and then they're back to being stuck. When I saw these patterns return time after time after time, like people feeling better is not really a process, understanding is not movement, and trying harder is really not change.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if we start someplace else? And that is with doing things that actually give us a sense of relief. Quick question. When you do things that are effective and work for you, how do you feel after you do that thing?
Really light, excited, amazing.
Pretty predictably, isn't it?
Like,
It's very predictable. But you didn't need to believe that you'd feel better. You just did it and you were feeling better. You did feel better.
yeah, the result was the feeling. I
Exactly.
wasn't really focused on the feeling, I was focused on doing it.
Bingo. And that's the big thing there. Now, when you asked, I know this is a long-winded way to get back down to you got to build how people think and start understanding this. So when you're profiling people, you can hear patterns. And the language pattern is through primarily their question concepts. And the titles, not the concepts themselves, but the titles are the who, what, where, when, why, and how, those 6 questions. But don't
I think that's a very, my God, I had so many thoughts that came up when the way you organized it, right? Like, who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? How do you do it? And normally, when you organize it, it removes the emotion from it. So, like you said, if you organize your thoughts that way, we stop being envious, we stop being angry, we stop comparing ourselves, we stop belittling ourselves, right? And I think it's such a new way of looking at profiling that you're sharing, Blair. Thank you. Because when people hear the word profiling, They often misunderstand it. I misunderstood it. And so, in a nutshell, how would you describe psychological profiling in a way that's very grounded and practical and not mystical or theoretical?
Well, first of all, I don't call it psychological profiling. It's just profiling, but it's profiling
Mm,
based on mind models. So you can
mm,
see these patterns, and mind models are, highly researched and tested thought frameworks and behaviors. So
mm,
every mind model works about 80% of the time right out of the gate once you learned how to use it. Well, when you learn how to use it and apply that into profiling, you've got an 80% probability that this person, just with this one thing, is likely doing that. And it could be way higher than that. Like when you answer me with your name, unless you're lying, that's your name. And when I say, so what do you do? You're going to give me a list of your stuff. You're probably not going to lie to me. You're going to tell me the truth. You want to be understood. Okay, so now I'm operating off of two chunks of data, which are
mm,
almost 100% accurate. That's not psychological, that's collecting data and
mm.
listening to how you said it. Now, if you take that information and flip it into, this other story, which is about how sad you're feeling and all your emotional constructs that are there, it probably tells me that you're also likely stuck in a pattern and you don't know how to get out of that. So
Right.
you're into a self-judgment model.
Coming back to what you were saying, and that's so valid when you ask those questions, and just look at it as data points versus adding so much emotion into it. And I'm thinking that is what most people get wrong about how our own mind works, right?
Well, what if we actually thought of everything as data points, including the emotion? Okay, so emotion has to be triggered by either memory or something in the present. So
Mm,
those are data points as well.
mm,
Okay, so what I do or say could have, well, it does. Like the neuroscience of it is that it both fires off cognitive and emotional information simultaneously without
mm.
separation. It's not one or the other.
Right.
That's one of the things that the research that I was doing for, 17 and a half years showed me is you cannot separate information from emotion. But most psychology focuses on the emotion and belief. But we can't change reliably our belief by believing. What we can do and this is now backed up by neuroscience, you can change your behavior and your belief must follow. Okay, because your brain with a belief can manufacture the belief, the perception, and see it the way that you think that it should work. However, when you do a behavior and you get the behavior done in an effective way, it works for you. You don't have to believe in it or not. You see the externally verifiable evidence, and that's evidence, and you feel better as a result. See,
Is that how you applied that in your own life and you said your father was in coma for 16 years?
yeah, 14,
How did
that's
you
okay.
manage that emotionally?
Well, you change it by saying, if I just feel bad because there's
Mm,
nothing I can do about my father's life, how do I manage myself differently? How do I change my behavior? If I'm walking around feeling sad about that all the time, and that's my main driver, then is that effective or not? Short answer is it's not. So, these are questions that I created for me, but found that they work brilliantly on my students. And I asked myself, so what might I do differently right now? Well, one of the things that I know, again, from neuroscience, if you sit around and do nothing or just watch TV or scroll or play games, and you physiologically are moving your body minimally, you're going to maintain mood and emotional stagnation. You're going to be stagnant. You're going to be stuck in that emotion. But if you get up and move and just walk and breathe, that will change your emotional state almost, well, literally within seconds. All you have to do is stand up, sit down. And the funny thing is, if you do that, you have a state change, identifiably and duplicatably, and it is an intentionally designed state change. What can I do to capture that? What can I do about that? Well, what if I ask myself a different set of questions? So, first thing, stand up, sit down, and then go, am I feeling exactly the same way? If your answer is absolutely yes, nothing changed, I call bullshit, because there's been studies done on this and state change has occurred. So there's research. And so if you deny yourself, you want to hold yourself stuck, fine. Be my guest, fill your boots. I don't care. It's not my life. But if you want to change, notice the difference. Because if you don't notice differences, you have to stay in the same spot. At least you will perceive yourself as being in that same spot. That's what happened to me. I was perceiving myself as stuck in that spot for, again, weeks. And I go, this isn't me. This isn't okay. I can't afford to do this. But then I started noticing little things, like a possibility of seeing myself changing my behavior. I stumbled across research back in the day that said if you are depressed, one of the best ways to handle your depression, and my dad being in Tacoma, I was depressed. So there's this 90, 180-day window, 3 to 6 months, basically. And your neuropeptides in your brain, neuropeptides are the chemicals of your mood, your emotion. And the neuropeptides will set at a certain level in your brain, and the moving average over the last 30, 60, 90 days of how happy or sad you've been is what you will call normal. So if you've seen people out there who have been, you've known them for years, but they're now gone through a tough time, and they're sort of not the happy person that they used to be, but you ask them, how do you feel? And that was like 3 months ago. They'll say, I'm feeling fine. I'm normal. But they don't look or behave like they're normal because you knew them when they weren't. They were happier. They were more alive. Okay, so what's happened is that moving average holds them stuck at a lower level. But that's now normal for them. How do you shift out of that? Well, again, research had shown that if you cry, your tears actually secrete your stressor chemicals in your body that make you sad, make you depressed, make you stressed in that way. So you ever have a good cry and
Oh my God, yes.
you
Now that makes sense.
and how do
Because every time I sneeze and I cry, my life shifts right after that.
exactly. Well, that's because your the neuropeptides that are in your neurochemicals of stress are literally coming out in your tears. And they've studied, this is facts. Your tear ducts, on average, have about 20 minutes worth of tears in them. Okay. You can cry for about 20 minutes, and then you'll start recovering. Now you'll recovering and you could be whimpering and whatnot, but not really crying, and it's not really hysterical. But then it starts, if you don't do anything and you're just laying there doing nothing, and you don't take advantage of that your body will build up more tears. It'll put more tears in your tear ducts, and you'll be able to go again. And so that can happen.
And so, am I right to think for people who haven't had a release for many, many months, years, and have gone through a very stressful, stage in life, when they cry, then it's not just 20 minutes, it's actually profuse crying for like hours and hours.
It certainly can be. And so that
Mm.
is part of the issue. So that profuse crying, though, will go through cycles because the body still only has about 20 minutes of tears, not hours of tears. But so it'll go hard crying, and then it softens. Okay, do you
Right.
have children?
Yes, I do.
Remember when they were babies and you were a
Mm.
new mom and your
Yeah.
baby started crying and you'd rush in there and you'd want to take care of your baby and nurture, hold it, and whatever, and it would cry, and then all of a sudden it would start feeling better. Well, if you
Yeah.
time that out, unfortunately I knew that when we had kids, so um, we would let the child cry for the first 10, 15 minutes easily on its own without rushing in there to, like, I was pulled. I wanted to go in there and take care of them because they're crying. But knowing full well that if you just wait for that slightly less intense moment of it and go in there, the probability of actually getting your child the relief, and they just start going like, "Oh, okay, I'm now being taken care of." Well, they got the stressor chemicals out. Now their body's rebuilding, but does it need to rebuild quickly, or does it just need to be soothed? The odds are it just needs to be soothed. Now, you'll start learning like we did. There's the crying before words. Well, it's just there's a discomfort, you pick them up, boom, they're fixed. That's communication. That's,
And like actually having a release.
yeah.
Yeah. And is that why you said just self awareness alone is often not enough to create real change, and you need that support because information like this is not available, right? You do need an expert to sort of support you through this.
Oh, exactly. It's very useful. But the thing that we do here is like with the whole thing about mind models is instead of building it in the traditional self-help where you're locked into somebody like me for decades, I go, no,
Mm.
once you learn this stuff, you start applying it a little bit. And my average time that I'm working with my most severe clients that are depressed or whatever is generally 12 sessions. And most of them have been seeing psychiatrists and psychologists and whatever and been on medications for a decade or two when I deal with the mental health issues. And,
Mhm.
this is a way of just being able to break through that and to be able to get it in such a way that you can break it down into specific things that you need to be able to do. And those things are always behaviors, not thoughts, but behaviors. What might I do differently right now? Now, notice that I start with a question. To me, the question is a behavior. So I start with that structure, but it's not how do I feel right now? And so
Mhm.
that doing that thing, it's not what, it's how. It's not
Mhm.
what. Well, if people say, I don't know what to do, great, do anything. Stand up, walk, do anything. Doesn't matter.
Which is why often they say
So,
when you're stressed or you're writing an angry email or you're going through something difficult, walk out, take a walk. And usually you just step away from that stress and you come back with a refreshed mind to then deal with it
so
differently.
true, but that's sort of like in the popular culture. And
Mm.
psychologists say, no, 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 you have to work through that. And I go, BS. That thing about just walk away, give yourself stuff. Um, yeah, that is a very, very valid, extremely helpful tool to be able to do it. So
Mhm.
you park yourself. So don't make a
Mhm.
decision impulsively, like right in that second. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's fine. Most times it's best if you've got all the data that you need
Right.
right in that
Mm-hmm.
moment, you can make rapid decisions. But if you're in a brand new situation or in a relationship that things are going sideways and you haven't experienced this before in that relationship, you can blow up the relationship unnecessarily.
Right. And so, what shifts when someone finally understands the internal structure of their mind rather than just managing the symptoms?
When you start getting that's where I work with senior executives and like multimillionaires, people that are entrepreneurs and they start out making a couple hundred grand and they go up to making like a couple million a year in a year. And they go, how
Mhm.
did I do that? Well, I changed how I was thinking because I was aware of what I was doing and how to behave differently. I stopped asking why. I
Mm.
started looking at how my questions
What?
are working effectively or ineffectively. That didn't work. You go to what worked about that? Oh, well, that part worked, that part didn't work. Now you're figuring out the parts that are working. Well, now, if that part didn't work, do I want to do more of that? No. So do it again, but don't do that part of it. Well, now you've just taken the thing that worked, thrown out the thing that didn't work, and now you do it again and you find another part or you expand on the thing that works.
Mm.
I mean, it sounds so simple, but it actually is. When our society is based on why this, why that, and I call it the why hole. Okay, because why holes suck you in just like a black hole. It sucks you down and it doesn't let you go. And when I've heard decades of people talking about the times in their life that didn't work, why is the number one thing that they share? Why this? Why this story? Why that? But you say, so what might you do differently? I don't know. But I sure know why it didn't work, and I don't want to do that again. So what might you do differently? Again, I don't know. They spent so much time practicing their they know why it didn't work.
And it's funny, and no pun intended here, Blair. But why do high performing people often struggle the most internally? And when things look successful on the outside, they're still very much struggling. So maybe I shouldn't ask why here. I should ask what should they be doing differently?
Exactly. And what they should be doing is their internal struggles, they're buying into psychology and trying to mimic psychology. And I've worked with really high performing individuals, like a person like he was in the top 1,000. He owned a company that was in the top 1,000 um, highest companies in the country. And that was one of the things that he said. And I asked you, if you were in business, and this was your business, not your son, not your wife, but a business partner, what would you be asking then? His questions go away from why. Why did you do that? Why don't you do this? Da 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 da. Into exploring with a mind model. And I mean, it's a taught model for curiosity. And
Mm.
all of a sudden, he's getting curious. And then he starts going into, oh, well, now I have to find out. And it's called the three E's. It's a group of things. Is that effective for you? Instead of telling
Mhm.
people what's right and wrong, he starts asking, is that effective or ineffective? And is that externally verifiable or just internally verifiable? And he's, well, that's actually externally verifiable. These data points are there. And emotions can almost always be seen as externally verifiable data points, either in yourself or on other people. You cry, you're happy, you're doing whatever. But those are, and then you can evaluate that as opposed to judge it. Is that
Mhm.
right, wrong, good, or bad? Judgment
Mhm.
or ineffective evaluation. And it's externally verifiable because now it's not your opinion. It's stuff.
then the more you share this, Blair, the more it's making me realize that when you ask why, it gets your defenses up. So not only your own defense is up, but even when you're asking someone across you why, there's a sense of accusation
Bingo.
that
It
comes.
has to. You
Mm,
must defend yourself with a why. So we've learned to do that in a socially acceptable model, but we walk away
mm,
and we still feel that lingering trigger of defensiveness. And why did I screw up? And how long does it take you to get out
mm,
of your own way? And so now you're starting to hear all of these bits and pieces that I learned over the years. And you start seeing, feeling, literally feeling and perceiving there's some kind of link, some kind of magical overview of all of this that's tying everything together. Only thing, it's not magic, it's identifiable, repeatable, and duplicatable. And it's named and labeled in such a way that, oh, is there a pattern here? And you go, if there is a pattern here, and I start hearing how somebody's thinking in real time, they're giving me this information about them. And oh, if you're thinking this way, you're probably also going to think this way. Take that same pattern and apply it in a different situation. So, well,
so I'd love to give listeners something experiential here,
bingo.
Blair. So if someone's listening right now who's feeling overwhelmed or internally conflicted, what's that one question they could ask themselves today that might open up awareness? And it definitely doesn't start with a why.
Exactly. It's saying, is what I'm doing right now, RFN, in this second, effective or ineffective? Is that thing that I'm worrying about something that I can change right now? And if I can't change it right now, then I would suggest strongly find something that you can do right now that's different than what you were going to do. So, one of the things that I was before, like that experiential thing, I don't know. Would you mind? Like this will become evident, self-evident to your listeners if I can sort of do a micro profile on you. Okay, so
I'm actually excited. I was going to
okay,
ask you
so I'm
anyway.
going to stick to the incredibly obvious. That was not stated, it was inferred to by your language and your behaviors. So
Hmm.
first things first, Um, okay, what I normally do if I'm doing a profile, I'll treat it mostly normally right now. So, are you married?
Yes.
Great. And how many I know that you've had babies, so how many kids have you had?
One 11-year-old
Okay, great. Good. Boy or girl?
boy.
Yep. And how you said that, I've said probably a boy in my head because how you said that inferred it was more likely a boy. Okay.
How's that?
Well, tonality is a big part of it. So, what do you do for fun?
Play with my son.
Great. What do you do for, other than doing podcasts, yeah, unless this is your work, what do you do for work?
I head an operations team in a wealth management firm.
Nice. Okay. So, did you notice how your language, and to the listeners, did you notice how her language pattern shifted and her tone shifted when she answered the business question to what do you
Mm,
do for fun? Play with your son. Um, boom. Like very different answers, very different tonality, very different structure to the answers. So, one of the things that I can point out, do you mind if I share with you a little bit?
sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
So, you're a moderate to, depending on the situation you're in, but mostly an incredibly curious person. Curiosity, as I say, killed the cat, but you're somebody who has learned how to manage the intensity of the curiosity without losing the intention of the curiosity. You're also looking in your job and life to some degree on how to inspire people to problem solve differently.
Mm.
That's done with your son to some degree, but mostly at work. There's when you hear the pattern, like I've heard it a lot. I know that there's a group of people that you work around, but there's a high probability that you've got one or two people that are not as productive and as effective as you'd like them to be. And that is frustrating you at this moment. You cannot do anything specifically about them, but you can influence them. That level of inferred or implied frustration came through in your language. But you have also a language pattern that inferred that there is a lot of connection and I want to use the word almost joy in what you do. You enjoy it a lot, but it doesn't leverage you as consistently as you'd like. And that's through the other people. So you have performance challenges with others and yourself. You also take a lot of that responsibility on as though it's fully your responsibility.
Wow. And you could tell all that with just these few questions. Wow. And it's spot on, by the way. All of you listening, he hit the nail on the head with all of that.
Good. So basically, what I've done is I've heard language patterns, mostly question concepts, and how you organize them, but how you intonate them, like your tonal patterning on them, and the conversation we've had thus far. And so these give me high probability indications. And this is trainable. When you hear the pattern, we convey information. The majority of our information, studies have proven that the majority of how we communicate is not the words, it's non-word. It's how the word is said, the intonation, the expression, the tone, all of that stuff. Your expression on your face shifts. So you can see where things are giving you joy. Like all of a sudden, if you go back to your, you know, what do you do for fun? Like, oh, play with my son. Like it's just like it was neutral. Then
It just lighted me up.
that's right. So that grabbed you. And that was very genuine. It wasn't top of mind, but
Mhm.
it was first in line. So
Mhm.
something else had top of mind. So what I went to was work. See what happens, see what happens there. All of a sudden, everything was congruent right up front, but it wasn't
Right.
as fun. It wasn't the fun thing. It was the responsible. It was the tone was muted a little more. And that
Mhm.
interpretation, when you take that with the word choice and how that was stated, gave me a high probability of that, but it built over time. So the concern was up front, but it got better over time in your tone. And in that brief few seconds, it had a pattern to it. Well, recognize the pattern and see that happening enough, and then you start recognizing that one or two people are not doing what you would like them to do, but other people are doing a lot of what you want them to do. So, and they're highly effective. And because you wound up on a very buoyant note overall, not a downer note. Yet it
Right.
was still not as fun as your son being able
Mm.
to recognize that. So now I can see, oh, this is going in the direction, but it could be this much more fun, but it's only down here because this is was really fun and this is just doing okay. So let's take a look at where those emotional layers are, and that gives me more data.
Wow. That is amazing. Blair, this has been such a powerful and such a learning conversation for me. I didn't even think profiling could really change the way I have started looking at it right now. So if people want to explore your work further and learn more about you and your programs, where's the best place for them to start?
Well, if they want, they can start by just getting one of my books, like Ultimate Mind Hacking, available on Amazon. And then the other one is The Phobia Freedom Formula, also available on Amazon. So both of them talk, Ultimate Mind Hacking walks you through 23 unhealthy mindsets and gives you 16 mind models
Mhm.
that help you smash those unhealthy mindsets. And mind models can be stacked, can be put together in different patterns. And I've given you one. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make sure you have a link so that people can um, get a free mind model stack. It's, you know, mind model method is a mini book, a 4-page book that describes in detail the 3 E's that I shared with you. It
Amazing.
all
And I'll drop it in the description box below so people can access that.
absolutely. As well, there's in that freebie, there's an hour and 20-minute masterclass on how to
Mm.
functionally use what that stack of mind models, the 3 E's, and what people got from it. So, and if you want to explore more, it'll give you go to blairdunkley.com and and that sort of thing. So I'm also working in a number of areas. Um, but blairdunkley.com has everything that I do. So if you want to,
And that's so incredibly generous of you, Blair. Thank you for sharing it with me and my listeners. And I'm, again, as I mentioned, will drop everything in the description box below. And so, thank you so much for being here, Blair, and for the depth you bring to this work. And I know you've had your own personal challenges that you had to work through that has finally got into this amazing place. And to everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. If the world feels heavy right now, remember this. Understanding your mind doesn't remove the weight, but it helps you carry it with more clarity and less fear. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you.